Hi, this is John Jerkowitz, and this is my second in a series of Hangouts on You Deserve and Make the World You Want Every Day You're Alive. And today we're going to talk about how you tell a story every time you walk into the room. What does that mean practically? Well, I'd like to spend the bulk of tonight talking to you about comfort zones because it's been my belief in close to 40 years of being involved in businesses of all different sorts, that the only thing we really have to sell is ourselves. And when we do that, we create an image and a perception. Now, if you remember last week, I talked to you about two people I'd met over the course of my many miles of travel. Both were job candidates, both were out of college, both were looking to start a career. One suffered from the Eeyore syndrome. If you're a fan of Winnie the Pooh, you remember Eeyore as being the donkey with the long floppy ears and the sad face who walks around going, "Poor me, ain't it a shame?" We all know some Eeyores. The other person took some limitations they had in their educational background and went ahead and got the career they wanted to get simply because they had some strong goals, they set their sights on it, and their comfort zone was infinitely larger than the other person's was. Why is that? One of the things I strongly believe in and have since I started my business about 15 years ago was something called outcome-based coaching. See, it's really nice for us to get together here periodically and tell one another how wonderful we are, but what's the outcome? When I sit down with a client for the first time, one of the questions I ask them to think about is, what do you want to get out of this relationship? When the day is done and we shake hands and walk off into the sunset, what did you want to accomplish? And then I send them away for a week. And I tell them, I don't want you to make a decision whether you work with me on developing your career and your life to all the things you want or not right now. I want you to go home and I want you to think about it. And I want you to assess your level of comfort with growth. You also might remember last week that I told you I believe there are three wonderful things that I've seen in people who have been successful in their lives and careers. In a few minutes, I'm going to share with you two real-life people that I know, and I know many, but two that came to mind as I was preparing for this, who embody these three principles. First principle is, you deserve to be successful. I sit down with somebody to begin a coaching experience, and I tell them, if you don't believe it, why should I? Doesn't really matter what I believe. Saw one of those little, I call them postcards on a social media site the other day that said, I used to care what other people thought about me, and then I tried to pay my bills with that. Doesn't work out real well, does it? When you walk into a room, can you tell the people who deserve to be successful? There's a certain aura that comes off of them. There's a confidence. They know they belong in that group of people. They know they belong, well, they're comfortable in their own skin. Second thing is, you are worth all the effort you put into yourself. I'm not a negative person. I'm a realist. And unfortunately, in today's world, we have a lot of people through the cross-section of any major society that believes they're entitled to something. If the person to my left and right has it, then I have to have it too. And it really doesn't matter how hard they work to get there. Are you worth the effort you put into yourself? So you see, when you walk into a room and somebody sees that confidence that exudes because you know your hard work and effort are going to pay off, they're immediately attracted to you. Those are the kind of people you want to do business with. And by hard work, I don't mean that you walk in and wipe a ton of sweat off your brow and say, gosh, I'm tired. Effort and hard work are the children of passion. If you have a real passion for what you're doing, you're going to put forth a real hard effort. You're going to put forth a real strong work ethic to accomplish the things you want to, because you cannot do all that hard work unless you believe you deserve the success. They kind of go in tandem. You deserve to be successful. You're worth all the effort you put into yourself. Point number 3, you are who you hang around with. And I think this is where we hit the real core of comfort zone management. You see, some of us have a circle of people that's about this big. And we keep that circle of people who reinforce the limiting beliefs we have about ourselves and other people, and we won't let anybody else into that circle. So when we walk into the room and we have some very strong limiting beliefs, the very first thing we do is we pull out our ruler and we start measuring all those folks sitting in the room. Now, that room might be virtual, and there might be millions of people out there. But if I really have a system that limits my belief, I'm not going to stay in business real long. If I have a system that limits my belief, I'm not going to attain the job or the career I want, the relationship I want. And I think the beautiful thing about all 3 of these things is you can take them and you can use them as an amazing template for every facet of your life. Do I deserve success? Am I worth all the effort I'm about to put into this? And who am I hanging around with? When you walk into the room and you begin to tell that story, if your comfort zone's that wide, you're open, you're accepting. One of the things I found about people who have layer upon layer of comfort zones that are so large and so magnanimous is that they will give you something without ever asking for anything in return. They may be the very best sales marketing gurus in the world. They will never ask you for anything. They'll always give. At the end of the webinar or the hangout or the workshop, there isn't of, and all this can be yours for $499.95. They give. They know who they are. And they know that if they have limits in their lives, those limits are temporary. They're things that they work to strategize on and to overcome. That's why when they walk into a room, our faces light up. Ah, so-and-so's here. Now, if you live in a limiting belief system and you walk into a room, I've done it. I'm sure some of you have done it. You go, oh, look who's here. There's some people we just don't want to be around. And what's so sad and unfortunate is that those people don't realize that it's not a major overhaul, it's a tweak in perception. Look, I'm sure we all know there have been times and situations and circumstances in our lives that haven't really turned out the way we wanted them to. And each time that happens, we have a choice. The late Zig Ziglar tells a wonderful, wonderful story about two twin boys who woke up on Christmas morning and raced one another down the stairs to get into the living room to see what was under the tree. As they slid across the hardwood floors, they looked up, and sitting under the tree was a massive pile of horse manure. First little boy stomped his feet, sat down on the couch, and said, "Horse manure? That's what we get for Christmas?" The second little boy never heard him. He was really, really too busy throwing the horse manure up in the air and saying, "There's got to be a pony under here somewhere." Absolutely amazing, isn't it? Which little boy are you? Which little boy am I? Every time we're faced with a situation or circumstance that's a challenge, we're one of those two little boys. Now, when I started a few minutes ago, I told you I was going to tell you a real-life story about two different people. They're two people I know very well. I've known them for a long time. First person's name is Rich McCardle. Now, Rich today is the Vice President of Corporate Public Affairs. I had to look down to read that so I make sure I got it right. Vice President of Corporate and Public Affairs for United Parcel Service. But as the late Paul Harvey used to say, let me tell you the rest of the story. I've known Rich since he was in the 6th grade. He went to a high school that wasn't known for its academics or its athletics, for that matter. It was a high school close to his home. He excelled in football and basketball, particularly in football. He was honorable mention All-State, first time and only time that ever happened at his high school in football, and he did it playing tight end. Now, Rich was a small tight end. He was offered a scholarship to a college in Tennessee, went down there, worked hard his freshman year, and for those of you who've been involved in any endeavor, athletic or not, you know your first year in college is always learning the system, doing a lot of grunt work. Rich got in a few games, and at the end of the first season there, the football coach was fired. New coach comes in the next year, and he decides that he's going to completely change the offense. He's going to do things entirely different. And Rich, thank you very much. Glad you were here. You don't have a scholarship. So Rich goes back home to Louisville, Kentucky, and he enrolls in the University of Louisville, where he graduated from 3 years later, I believe, with a double degree in business and marketing. And while he was doing that, he began working at UPS, unloading planes and boxcars in the middle of the night. Finished working for UPS and decided that was a place he wanted to work. And he became a supervisor. And after a while, they put him in charge of export operations to Europe. That meant he worked from midnight till 8 in the morning because it was daytime in Europe when it was nighttime in Kentucky. After that, he went to Denver. After Denver, he went to California, actually Whittier. After he was in Whittier, he went to Columbia, South Carolina. And lo and behold, one night, got a phone call that says, "Hey, guess where I'm going to?" "Where?" "Well, I've been invited to the State of the Union address." "Really?" Along the way, he picked up an MBA. He worked hard. And if you met him on the golf course or you met him at a restaurant or a hangout or anywhere else, you really wouldn't know the guy was a vice president of corporate affairs. Matter of fact, I didn't know it. This is kind of the sad part of the story. I didn't know it till his brother passed away. Oh, I knew he'd done well at UPS, but while we're at the funeral, we're looking at all these flowers that came from UPS all over the country. And I remarked to his wife, Kim, I said, wow. And she goes, yeah, he's pretty important. At any point in this journey, he could have said, you know what, things just aren't going to work out. I went to a high school that really didn't have a lot of on the ball academically, graduated with honors, became honorable mention All-State, went to a college that played me a little bit and then said goodbye, came back home, had to work and go to school, transferred 4 or 5 times in the course of his career. But I think Rich really kind of embodied what I'm talking about in comfort zones. He knew he deserved to be successful. Remember I told you I've known him since he was in the 6th or 7th grade? Hey, he was like that then. Put a lot of hard work and effort into it. He played high school football, played college football, carried a double major while working in the middle of the night. And he hung around with people that fortified him. See, the biggest thing about comfort zones is that we almost have to work real hard to surgically remove the fear that's inside of us. We don't expand our comfort zones simply because we say, you know what, I don't feel comfortable there. Those aren't my people. That's not my niche. That's not my tribe. Before I tell you the second story, I'm going to share a belief that I have. And I don't believe in niches, and I don't believe in tribes. Oh, I think there has to be a leaping off point. I think you have to identify a group of people that you can identify with who want to be challenged and grow, that are going to buy your product or service. But I don't think you stop there. I think you continue to develop a service, a product, and your comfort zone grows and grows and grows. See, once we start talking in limiting terms like niches and tribes, we're limiting ourselves. And that, although I didn't plan it this way, is a good segue into the second guy I want to talk to you about. A guy by the name of Jerry Batsner. Jerry's a high school graduate. And when he graduated from high school, he went into a family-owned business. At the time, it was called Batsner Pest Control. You sit back a minute, you might squirm, or you might screw your face up. Ew, a bug killer. Yeah, that's what they were back then. Jerry's mom and dad owned the business. Business had been around, I believe, since 1945. So Jerry comes in, and he starts out as a technician. He's going to learn the business. And after he becomes a technician, he becomes a service manager. And after he becomes a service manager, he becomes the president of the company. And I know what you're saying, well, it's a family-owned business, and he probably had a leg up. But while Jerry was learning the business, and while Jerry was morphing himself into different positions, expanding his comfort zone, what Jerry was doing was changing the focus of Batsner Pest Control. And slowly it evolved into Batsner Pest Management. And while it did, Jerry became, again, I believe at age 27, the youngest president of the Wisconsin State Pest Control Association. When Jerry came into the business, a large percent of its business was residential. And Jerry had the foresight to realize that as he grew in the business and industry, that the future of that company was not in residential pest control, but it was industrial and commercial pest management. So Jerry kind of embarked upon a process, and as he did, his comfort zone expanded. He didn't see any limitations, he saw opportunities. We'll fast forward a little bit. And at some point in time in his career, when he was president of the company, Jerry bought the business from his mom and dad. And today he runs a very successful, privately held pest management group in the state of Wisconsin. You can Google search both Jerry and Rich, and I'll tell you in the spirit of full disclosure, and I didn't plan it this way, they just popped into my head. They're both my brother-in-laws. I've known both of them for a long time. I'm only about 3 years older than Jerry, and we actually went to the same elementary school. I remember him when I was in 8th grade and he was in 5th grade. But both of these people could have stopped at any point in their career because there was a belief that limited them. Jerry could have gone into the pest control business that his mom and dad had worked so hard to make successful, said, you know what, I'm going to maintain. I'm going to maintain. Reminds me of my favorite story in the Bible, all-time favorite story. There's a king who got ready to take an extended sabbatical. He's going to be gone for a couple of years. So he looked around and called his 3 most trusted servants into the room, and he said, hey guys, tell you what, I'm going to be gone for a while. Now, you ain't going to find it the way I'm telling it in the Bible, but trust me, this is the way it is. And he says, I'm going to divide my resources evenly to all 3 of you because you're the only people I trust. So here you go. They each get a big old bag of money. King gets on his horse, rides off into the sunset, and about 3 years later he comes back after he kind of took a shower, had a meal, caught up on his email, called his 3 most trusted servants into the room. Hey, 3 most trusted servants, come in here and give me a full report. First guy steps forward, grinning from ear to ear, as I would in this situation, and says, King, good news. Took what you gave me and I tripled it. And the king looks at him and grins, says, well done, good and faithful servant. Pats him on the head, gives him a promotion, a few extra weeks vacation, better company car. Away he goes. Second servant steps forward, kind of dusts himself off, looks at the king and says, I doubled your money. King says, good. First one triples my money, you double my money. I ought to stay gone longer. King looks at him and says the same thing again. Well done, good and faithful servant. Gives him a promotion, company car, office with a window. Third guy's just kind of standing there. You ever been there? Thinking, ew, crap. Third guy comes forward, kind of looks at the ground. King says, well, tell me what you did. I mean, here's the old king. He's sitting there thinking, first guy tripled my money. Second guy doubled my money. Wonder what this guy did. This guy reaches behind him, pulls out his bag of money and sets it in front of the king and says, there you go. I took it out and I buried it. Now, the Bible doesn't tell us what happened to the third guy. But let's put him in our culture and society. And he didn't have a job by the end of the day. And honestly, as he was packing up his desk or his cubicle or his locker or whatever, as he walked away, I can quite imagine that he's going, what did I do wrong? I mean, I guarded this. Honestly and sincerely, in his mind and in his heart, he never saw the opportunities that existed for him. His comfort zone was limited. His beliefs were limited. Now, on the other hand, you have the guy that goes out and triples the resource. Did he take a big risk? Sure. But when you and I think that we deserve to be successful and that we're worth all the work and hard effort, we're going to seek out those people who are going to lift us up. See, when we keep a tight-knit little circle of people who just believe what we do, no fresh ideas get in. Nothing grows. But when we open ourselves up to people, I'll admit something to you. I attend a lot of hangouts here because I'm trying to learn. Half the time, I don't know what they're talking about. Sometimes some of these folks get so gosh darn technical on me, I'm going, whoa. But I listen and I watch because I'm trying to expand my comfort zone. Look, I come from a generation who thinks this whole notion and concept is anathema. We don't do video, webinar, hangout training. No, no, no. You have to have a group of people live and in front of you at all times. Make sure no one falls asleep. Now, I will tell you in all honesty, there is some value in live training, and the value is this. Right now, there's none of you watching me. The value is that if you were all sitting in front of me right now, I could tell when I'd need to change gears if I saw you starting to drift off or not pay attention. Maybe it'd be time for an activity. But guess what? I found in my business, as a coach and as a consultant, that companies are much more willing to pay a fee to do a live feed than they are to put me on an airplane, feed me, lodge me, and put me in front of a group of people for a limited amount of time. Someone chooses to use this hangout tonight as a training tool. They can go to YouTube and use it. The beautiful thing is they're not going to pay a dime for it. Well, maybe that's beautiful for them. A lot of people in my age group, in my culture, people I hang around with, who shake their fist at the rain. This isn't right. Time for another story. About 8 or 9 years ago, I interviewed a gentleman who had applied for a vice president of marketing job. He had a resume that was sterling. Frankly, I'm not quite sure why he was applying for the company I was doing business with, but the CFO and he were good friends, had worked together at a company when they both got out of college. He said, hey, John, do me a favor, interview this guy. So we met for breakfast. And after about a half hour, he and I both realized that his needs and the company's needs were about as far apart as east and west. So before we left, I said, hey, hope you don't mind. I'm a company of one person, which means I'm the marketing department, the sales department, the accounting department, the production department. Many of you watching here get the drift. Give me a good marketing tip. And he sat back for a minute and he said, I'm going to give you the best one anyone could ever give you. I said, what's that? He said, reinvent yourself every 3 or 4 years. And for the most part, I've tried to do that. I started my business as a human resource consultant, doing handbooks and investigations and EEOC training and what questions to ask and not to ask. And my first love was always training and development, so I kind of slowly started to integrate management development. And after a while, I realized that, that circle was too small. So I started conducting leadership workshops, a cross-section of the organization. Had one company that over a 3-year period, I worked with every employee in their organization in a 2-day leadership workshop to encourage them to step forward as leaders in their workplace, help benefit the company, and all those other really cool and neat things. After a while, we started doing focus groups with labor leaders and management people and talking about common leadership issues. A little later on, I realized I had probably been coaching people longer than I understood what coaching was. And I'm one of, I guess, the old timers in the coaching profession. I've been doing it for over 15 years. So I started to accentuate my coaching practice. Now, please don't misunderstand me. I'm not sitting here this evening trying to do a by John Jerkowitz. I guess what I'm doing is I'm talking about the thing I know the best, and that's me. And I took him to heart. But in order to do that, I had to greatly expand my comfort zone, and sometimes I didn't want to. Sometimes everything that was inside of me, every belief, and often they're called scotomas, and it comes from a Greek word, and it's a belief we hold that's not true. You have to be at a certain point in your life and career to do blah, blah, blah. You have to have a certain amount of education to do blah, blah, blah. You have to go to a certain school to do blah, blah, blah. Well, you look at the two people I talked to you about this evening, Rich McCardle and Jerry Batzner, and if you kind of slide the little thing back and listen to my story about them again, you'll see that in each case, the blah, blah, blah wasn't there. They created it. Was it comfortable for them all the time? No, but I think it became more comfortable, and I think it's something we all share in common. You are who you hang around with. Your comfort zone grows and expands, and you become more secure in it. You tell that positive story when you walk in a room, depending how comfortable you are in your own skin. Didn't say perfect, said comfortable. So how comfortable are you? How big is that circle of people you hang around with? Do you just keep that circle small so that when things get a little rocky, you have people to reassure you? Well, what usually happens then is you all go sliding down the coal chute. Nobody, including me, is old enough to remember what a coal chute was, together. But when you start to expand that comfort zone, when you start hanging around with people that will challenge you, people that are different than you are, that's when you walk into a room and people say, hey, who is that guy? Or, hey, I need to go over and talk to that guy. Or, what do you do? Because I want some of that. And then the marketing, the sales, the advertising is something that becomes natural. It's something that flows out of you. And I just think that's wonderful and that's amazing. Tell you a story again about a gentleman by the name of Lou Tice. Some of you may be familiar with Lou. He owned a company called Pacific Institute out of Seattle, Washington. And Lou not only was a great motivational, inspirational consultant and speaker, he also worked with a lot of people in the football industry. He worked with Pete Carroll, both when Pete was at USC and with the Seattle Seahawks. He worked with Steve Sarkisian at USC and at the University of Washington. And Lou was a former football coach and high school teacher himself, so he kind of had an affinity for those folks. And Lou passed away a little while ago, but I had the privilege of studying under him for a number of years. And I'll never forget the one story he told about comfort zones and about expanding that circle of who you hang around with. He said a number of years after he started coaching, one of his players came back. Man had been a star football player in college, gone on into business, was very successful, and had asked Lou to be the godfather of his first child. So he came to town and he called Lou and he said, I want to take you and your wife out to dinner. And they're sitting there eating dinner, and he said, you know, Coach, honestly, outside of my mom and dad, I don't think I owe anybody any more than I owe you. And Lou said he kind of sat there and nodded his head a little embarrassed. You know how you get. Okay. By the way, people comfortable in their own skin love compliments. It just reinforces and fortifies what they already believe about themselves. So Lou said he goes on and on, talking a little bit about how wonderful he was in the whole 9 yards. And he says, and Coach, he said, the reason I'm bringing this up to you is he said, I've got a wonderful investment opportunity for you. And he said, you know, it's going to cost you $10,000, but this thing is almost guaranteed return. And Lou said, well, you know, I'd love to, but I don't have 10 grand. Said the young man looked across the table at him and said, Coach, look, I understand that. I'll put the 10 grand up for you. And when we cash this out, you just give me the 10 grand seed money out of what we make in a profit. Lou said at the time, he said, I almost felt like he backed me into a corner. He said, so I closed my eyes for a minute and I said, you know, son, he said, it's just enough for me to be your son's godfather. He said, and then in the blink of an eye, the man looked across the table at me and said, Coach, why can't you do both? And I think every time I'm faced with a challenge or every time I'm faced with that scotoma that limits my belief, I ask myself that question, why can't you do both? Oh, yeah, you know, I am not one of these let's go out on the front porch, put our arms around one another, and sing We Are the World people. I believe in outcomes. So I'd like to spend a few minutes with you before we sign off, just simply talking about how do you practically apply all of this? Let's say you're a consultant. Let's say even make it a little more of a challenge, at least this is from my perspective. You're an internet consultant. You walk into a virtual room every time you go to market your product or service. The only thing I have to evaluate you on is the energy and the enthusiasm you bring to that product or process. It's not like the old days where you sat across from me and I could ascertain your body language, your integrity. It's a crazy world. And our comfort zones have to expand. So if you come to me or I come to you, I better have it together or I'm not going to be in business real long. I better know what I'm talking about, and you better walk away with something. So I'm going to give you something to walk away with tonight. I've shared 2 examples with you, people I know who didn't have the skids greased for them to slide into success. 2 people who believed in themselves, 2 people who were worth the effort, and 2 people who hung around with people that lifted them up. So what about you? I'm going to ask you the same thing I ask a potential client. You can write to me. You can get back with me. You can talk to me, dozens of ways with this answer. When the day is done, what do you hope to get out of the relationship you have with yourself, with your business, and with your clients? When you close your eyes, what does it look like in the end? What are you willing to do to get there? Who are you willing to partner with to make that a reality? I'll share a little secret with you. I usually do 15 to 20 minutes of meditation most mornings. And one of the things I got from a guided meditation I did this morning was talking about awareness and presence. And the guide said, open your eyes and look at what you see. Open your mouth and look at what you say. Open your heart and look at what you feel. Because if you're going to sit in front of me and you're going to ask me to do business with you, that's how I'm going to evaluate you. Not by what you want to take, but by what you want to give. And sometimes that's a difficult thing to do. But most of the time, you and I find an extremely great benefit from doing that. You deserve to be successful. You're worth all the effort you put into yourself, and you are who you hang around with. Nothing fancy or exotic there, no bells or whistles. Just simply a matter of reinforcing that belief and finding people who believe what you do. And to that end, I'm really, really excited because next week I'm going to have a guest. I'm going to have a guest that's going to share an amazing story and journey with you. The person's name is Kate Whistler Sale. And in 2012, Kate and her husband John and 2 dogs, service dogs, began a journey across the United States that began in Delaware and ended in Long Beach, California. And if you remember the summer of 2012, you're going to remember that we had triple-digit temperatures all across the United States. Kate and John walked 3,700 miles over a period of about 6.5 months. In the course of their journey, they took their animals to nursing homes, to pediatric wards, to shut-ins, to disabled veterans, and they did it to highlight the cause of using animals in rehabilitation and healing. I've known Kate for about 4 years. She's going to share an amazing story with you. She's going to talk about overcoming some obstacles. She's going to talk about the whole thing she and John went into in planning all of this. And I'm going to tell you, I'm really excited because the bulk of what I'm going to share is going to be shared through her. So mark your calendar. We're shooting for 7 o'clock next Tuesday. Say I'm hoping to have Kate next week. Unfortunately, right now, she is dealing with a very ill family member, a grandmother, and she's not sure she's going to be able to make it. If we don't have her next week, we'll have her on the week after. I'm going to wrap it up now. Hope you all enjoyed this. I know I enjoyed spending the time with you. And if you have any questions or comments, you can email me at john.jerkowitz@gmail.com. And I look forward again to talking to you next week. Have a good evening.